In this tutorial, we're going to show you what all the 8th wall controllers and modules do inside of Unity to get you up and running quickly and easily to build your next augmented reality app once to run on every phone. Also, don't forget that to use all these great tools, you're going to want to download the 8th wall XR for Unity, available here for free on our console. So let's get started. Now in this video, we're going to be working off the project that we created in the last video that showed you how to make your first AR app in less than 15 minutes. Otherwise, you can re-download this project ready to go from the 8th wall console. All that information was based off this quick start page, and if you go to the very bottom, under next steps, it says follow the full tutorial. That's where we're going to go now. So if you go to this tutorial page, you'll see a lot of information on how to get started with 8th wall inside of Unity, much of which we covered in the last video. But now we're going to get a little bit more detailed. On the left, you'll see create an XR controller. We're going to start here. If you're building an app from scratch, this is the first step you're going to want to do to enable all of the 8th wall XR content within your scene. Now, if we jump into Unity, we'll already see that we have an XR controller built into our scene hierarchy with the tag XR controller marked over here. Now, don't change this because the rest of the controllers we're going to be using will need to find this information in order to function properly. Now, if we can continue back through our documentation, you'll see that there's an add controllers to scene, which has a lot of great information. I'm actually going to jump all the way down here to the controllers section of the tutorial that has an overview. Now, these are some of the things we're going to be covering today, from the camera controller, the light, the surface, and some of the video controllers. Now, just a brief overview of what some of these do. The XR camera controller is going to attach to your main camera within Unity, and this controller is what's going to allow your phone or your device to control the camera placement within the game environment. The XR light controller is going to take the lighting information from the world around your device in real life and translate that intensity and light direction into your game environment so that the lighting conditions match in the augmented reality to the physical reality. That way your digital content matches the lighting of the physical reality. Both of these modules are already built in here. If you click on the main camera, you'll see the XR camera controller is already built in down here, and the directional light also contains the XR light controller as long as we're in our demo project. However, should you need to find these on your own, you can search into your project window under Assets, XR, Scripts. You'll see that there are a bunch of XR controllers here, such as the camera controller and the light controller. And all you need to do is drop these into the window. I'm going to remove this because we already have one. Moving on to the XR surface controller, this is what's going to allow the virtual world you create to be locked onto a surface in the physical world we're viewing. Think of this as the ground plane of your Unity project that everything will be parented to and locked onto a table surface or a floor surface in the real world. Now, since this is the first asset that doesn't already exist in our demo project, I'm going to show you how to implement the XR surface controller. So in Unity, what you're going to want to do is create a ground plane. What we can do is right-click within the hierarchy window, which shows us the assets already existing. And we're going to go to 3D object because a plane is a 3D object. Here it is, select that. And now we've created a plane. You may notice right up front that it is going to be placed in a weird position, probably above your assets here. And you could either manually move this down, or we could skip some steps, come over here to the transform tab, and we could take its Y or vertical positioning and change that to 0. So now it sits at origin underneath the assets. Let's go ahead and rename this plane. So if we right-clicked on plane, rename, let's call this game surface, because that's going to be the ground plane for our environment. So all this is right now is an asset. So let's go ahead and add our controller to make it a game surface. There are two ways to do this. One is to select the game surface and go to add component. And under here, you can begin to type XR surface and you'll see surface controller. And there you go. Now, alternatively, what we can do instead, if I remove this, you can do it another way. If I go down to assets, XR, scripts, and we can drag XR surface controller into that menu. Either way works. Now back in the documentation, you'll see there are some variables here to consider, and these exist right over here inside of our Unity project as little checkboxes. These are Boolean operations, so they're either on or they're off. Deform to surface will take the perfectly flat plane, and it'll try to deform it to your real world environment. If it's not a perfectly flat tabletop, it'll try to deform it to that surface. That particular feature is only available to ARCore and ARKit phones, but everything else we're doing here works just fine on all devices. Display immediately will allow the viewing of your assets on your device even before a surface has been detected. And as soon as the surface is detected, it'll lock to it. Let's jump over to lock to first surface just to say that if you have this on, it will stick to whatever the first surface detected is. If you have this off, the scene will be allowed to jump to newly detected surfaces or whatever is the active surface. Lastly is ground only, which attempts to keep your world solely on the ground where you stand, but with this off, it'll choose things like tabletops or things that are not at ground level. Now, another thing to mention here is that you can have augmented reality shadows. So I'm going to show you really quickly how to do that. Now, what you don't want to happen is this plane to actually be visible on your phone because it's going to cover whatever floor that this table is supposed to be sitting on, and that would break the immersion. So what we can do is if we go to all materials, you'll see one called XR transparent surface. This is something we provided for you that you can just click and drag right onto your plane. That will make that plane transparent. It'll still do exactly what it's supposed to do, but now we simply won't see it. But what we will see are any shadows rendered on top of it. By the way, if you would like documentation on this, if you follow the AR shadows link here, you can say click here. It'll take you down to these steps. Now to adjust the quality and the opacity of these shadows, you can go to directional light, and that will allow you to change the strength of the shadows from 0 to 1 if you'd like to lighten those up a bit. And if we zoom in on them, we can get a better idea of the intensity. You can also check the resolution here, but for real resolution differences, what we're going to want to do is go to Edit, Project Settings, Quality. This is where we will set the quality settings for our overall project, including these shadows on our devices. Now, there are two very important things to note here. The first is under the shadow category. We are currently on high resolution. We can change that to very high, and we can also change the shadow projection from stable fit to close fit. You'll see a jump in quality there as the shadow becomes a higher quality. Now, what's very important not to forget is that this looks great in our Unity project, and if you deployed this on a PC, Mac, or Linux setup, it would look just great. However, if you check the top right corner over here, you'll see these quality levels. We are currently on fantastic quality. However, this green check mark shows that we only have this setting active for PC, Mac, and Linux. If you are deploying for iOS or Android, we need to make sure those settings match the fantastic quality we've just set. All we need to do there, with everything set down below, is to click on these little default arrows underneath iOS and Android, and we'll just tell them, fantastic, fantastic. Now all three build targets are set to reflect the settings that we've created here. If you forget to do that, your shadows will not have the level of quality that you expect when you deploy to your mobile devices. Moving on through the tutorial, if we go down a bit, you'll see those example videos I was showing you that show you the deform to surface, display immediately, the XR surface controller, the ground only on, and the lock to first surface. The XR video controller is next, and what this is going to do is actually just take the input of your camera, so whatever your camera sees on your mobile device, and set that as the background of our app. That way you get the integration of your digital assets and the physical world. To forget this controller would be to leave a blank background underneath all of your digital assets, which would simply be a way to view your 3D assets on your phone, but without any context. So don't forget that controller. Next is the XR video texture controller, and what this is going to do is take that input from your camera and place it as a texture on top or within one of your digital assets. If you followed along in the last video, you saw that the actual TV in our project has that property, and it will mirror whatever you have in the camera view within the screen, just like you see here in the tutorial. Now, the last thing to know before you get started developing your app is that we have something called the 8th Wall XR Remote, which is an incredible tool to preview and test your augmented reality app in real time, either wirelessly or through USB, without having to rebuild and redeploy your app every time you make a change. A quick overview here is that you want to make sure you go to XR Controller and ensure that Enable Remote is turned on, and then go download our app and go from there. We also have a video tutorial on how to use the 8th Wall XR Remote app if you'd like to save time and use this tool. We hope this tutorial was helpful in preparing you to use 8th Wall XR, and we can't wait to see what you make next. Please leave any questions you have down in the comments. We'd love to hear from you, and please tag us in anything you make with 8th Wall XR. We'd love to support you. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next video.